more like something I worked for.
No, it's fine. It's been like that. It's working well.
All right, you're good to go.
Oh, okay. All right, my name is Kate Sky, and I'm a full stack developer. I work with .NET. I wanted to present here just as a practice to see how it feels. It feels kind of weird, but I wanted to come to this meetup for a long time. So I think I might have joined on a meetup for this group like back in August or July or something. Just I could never come. Currently, I work for CDW consulting there for a year, and I wrote this JavaScript library that is basically a credit card processing JavaScript that a partner would embed on their site, and they would submit credit card information to CDW, and they would get a token back. And I thought it's worth presenting here because I could, take some criticism on it, and maybe in the future, if they give me some more funds, I could improve on it. Because it is in production. There's a first partner that's going to be consuming it. It's called Cisco Meraki, so they're going to be plugging it into their system.
You're asking for criticism?
No.
I mean,
use the wrong word.
I this thing when I get home.
So the thing is, I have experience with JavaScript, and jQuery UI. I worked with Knockout for on some of the projects, and then I have a project with Angular. So I have experience with JavaScript, but this was kind of an odd one. They told me the only thing I could use is jQuery to work with DOM elements and get it from CDN and vanilla JavaScript. So I went to Pluralsight and I found the longest JavaScript course I could find on there. And it talked about hoisting and all these things that I've never heard before. So, so you will see that I'm using different ways of creating functions, and as a C# developer, I'm trying to make it look like classes, so it's not just a long piece of code. The problem that this particular library solves is storing credit card information and protecting data, consumer data. It's a PCI compliance issue, basically. And companies don't want to store that data, so they just give it to other companies. So that's this project is about that. And I'm gonna run. God, I don't even have it open. I'm sorry. I'm gonna run two Visual Studio.
Okay, which version of .NET Core? Which version of .NET
It's
Core?
2.1. Yeah. Is it bad?
Yeah. It's latest, yeah.
Yeah,
It's bad.
It's bad?
Yeah, it's just the way he should present, right? I'll
No. I guarantee you the words .NET Core have never been used at this meetup before. And there's only 4 of us that know what that is.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so what I did have to do.
2.3 is in preview right now.
All right. Okay.
What I did have to do for this presentation, I had to kind of take the production code, put it in the .NET Core just to make it, work, because we were using, I think 4.5 or something like that, and so it had some issues because the way the data comes back from APIs is different. It lower cases the properties, so we had to find some bugs last night, and my husband Eugene was kind of helping me, so it was it's really a last minute thing, just because I wanted to present, and
now you're going to go home and hack this.
Right? So this is basically the API that has this JavaScript. I called it Bootstrap.js, and it's going to be called from a caller. So I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to show how it's embedded onto an HTML page, basically. I know, I should have been doing that when I was sitting there, I'm sorry.
This is the authentic Visual Studio experience. Open a solution file and wait. And this is actually good.
Not too bad, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in order to call this this file, it needs two elements. One of them is the main one, which is it has an A, which is hard coded into that into the JavaScript file. And the way we present it to the client is there's a documentation that's out there that I can show later, so you don't have to wait for it to come up. When I'm gonna run both solutions at the same time. So this is the API. So this is the JavaScript, and what it does is when you click when you enter your credit card information, click validate, it goes to an API and it brings back a token. Okay. And the second one.
That means that embedded JavaScript, that there is like a script, you just call it by placing a tag in another
Yeah, I'm
application.
going to show that next.
Yeah? Okay.
Sorry, I totally forgot about where I'm going to embed
I think
it.
that's the main point of the awesome solution.
What?
That's the main point of the awesome solution, right?
Yeah, you're right. That's actually going to be in a different view. That's why I missed it. So up here, there's a script tag. Thank you, honey. The script tag actually has this JavaScript as with the source, and here are the data key elements that are passing some of the values that are needed for this script to work. For example, the API is protected with an auth token, so they actually would have to send that along with the transaction ID. And this is when the API is called, it would have to pass that var token to be validated. For this demo, I'm not using it. I actually commented it out, but in real life.
Why couldn't you put the JavaScript right in that app? Why should you call? Why should you call it?
Because
Like
we're
from
going to
one-
maintain it, we're going to support it and make
So
it better.
they load this from your
Yeah, they
repository
would be
or
loading
somewhere.
it from our API, yeah.
Gotcha.
And then you can upgrade it whenever you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you
So-
store it in your clients?
In my client?
Because you outsource it to them, right? Because they can handle the credit card information and you can not store it.
Yeah, they don't want to deal with credit card information at all. They just want to plug in the script and let us handle everything.
Sure.
So what they can do is they could look at the CSS that comes in through when you load the script, and they can actually add on to their CSS. They could make it look pretty, because this is very basic. Like I did add some alignment to the fields and whatnot, and I think I made this validate button a little bit round or whatever. So there's some basic validation. So if I click validate, it doesn't actually go to the API right away. So this is also kind of like another bonus that they could maybe make it pretty, pop up on the side and stuff like that. So this could be changed if they wanted to style it.
So this is client-side validation at this point.
Yeah, this
right?
is
No
client
data's
side.
been
Yeah,
sent.
I haven't sent. There was no call to the API yet. So if I did send a valid request, semi-valid, like right now if I put 118, it seems to be invalid, but this JavaScript doesn't validate that just because it's like just too much extra code, or API can handle that kind of thing. But let's just assume this is a valid credit card, and a user would click validate, and so this is what client would receive, like a GUID that they would store in their system, and when the order is complete, they would send this GUID back with an order, and the order API would know that this GUID is credit card token, let's call it, and it would go look up that credit card that's stored somewhere safely and process that order that way. So now I'm going to show the actual code of that JavaScript. And let's see. Yeah, I probably should have opened in VS Code, right?
Definitely.
Do you want me to do that?
No.
I can.
We do.
I've used it before.
Hey, Steve wants to talk tonight.
Yeah, but he will be able to criticize it, so.
Okay. Yeah, this is going to be a little harder to criticize. So one of the things I did at the end was I did use strict because I guess before that once I put that there, it did find some variables that were misspelled, and I was using them, so that kind of helped me. So that was a plus. So I am doing a self-executing function at the top, and this is my main function that loads the script. That uses the script that's script tag and loads all of the components onto a screen, onto an HTML page. So it's pretty short. It ends right here on line 25. So by the time it executes itself, it creates the form, and it wires up all of the click events and all of the key presses and everything. So I'll just kind of walk through the code. So my API module is my attempt to create a class that represents the API that I'm creating. And the reason I did it as, what is it, as a function expression?
Immediately invoke.
No, but this function is a function expression.
Oh, yeah.
Declaration.
Function declaration.
Declaration, okay. So this one, I wanted to return like an API so I can then say, okay, API, do something, okay? So, because I do use I have basically two of these that I'm using as classes, and the other ones are the AFU functions that I know that they will just do something to the DOM, and I don't care. I'm not going to reference them ever again. So for the DOM, the DOM control loader is kind of like the one that loads all the controls, and let's see. I was trying to make it as elegant as possible, because I don't want to load one control at a time. So I created an array of elements that kind of represent all of the controls on the screen, and it loads it like in a loop. So if we go into, does any of this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the action is actually the API path to call when you click validate, and it goes to the server. And right here, I just wanted to show that I do need to figure out what the server is, because this JavaScript could be executed in stage or in production or dev. So this is how I get the actual www.api.com or whatever. And then I need the action for later when I do a submit. And then load form actually loads all of the controls, and this piece right here is getting the jQuery. And the reason I'm doing this, this equals undefined and this whole thing, just in case all of the controls are on the page that already has JavaScript, the jQuery library, so I don't have to load it from CDN and mess something up. So. And the main is the load form. So let's go to the load form. On the load form, I wait for the jQuery to give me like the ready event. So this is when I know that I could start adding controls to the DOM. And if something happens within these lines, then I get this error. There's really no error handling in this JavaScript, because I know if something goes wrong, nothing will work, and they will just let us know, and I'll have to fix it. Because there's really no user. There's really no user. The user cannot do anything. It has to be a developer that needs to dig into this. So.
Test it in production.
User-based development.
Don't worry, we'll test it in production.
Yeah, we'll test it in production, exactly.
Not everybody knows.
So the controls, where did I set up the controls? So this is the loop that I was talking about. We're actually adding all of the controls, and I use the DOM control loader that initializes all the controls, and I set all the keys that they can or cannot press, and filtering out of all the allowed clicks and all that. And I add a button for the validations to show up, and then I wire up the submit form event, and this is where the actual call to the API happens. So there's some hiding of validation elements happens. Then it checks to see if we're good to submit the form because that client-side validation. And we create the data that's going to be submitted to the API, and then we do an AJAX call. And this one's it's pretty basic, but I wanted to show how the bearer token would be sent in this function right here. So this is where you would get a 401 if this token expired. And that's all she wrote.
Nice.
So, ending up, I think the whole point was not to show that awesomeness and cleanliness.
What was the point? What was my point?
But the embedded JavaScript, right? So you couldn't write it in one file. You had to consume that library.
Yeah.
And you had to provide that solution, right? And you just
this is the main point. So basically, just like SquareUp has an API for credit card processing. So we're basically trying to do kind of the same thing, providing our customers with PCI compliant way of processing credit cards and giving that solution through this very basic, but it has a lot of power. Like they can actually do what they need to do to protect the data. We do have a solution where they can send us credit card in an encrypted way, and this is we're trying to get away from that. So it's the API is happening server to server communication, so they have to encrypt it, and then on server we decrypt it. So the encryption key exchange has been a problem. There's just creating new keys is always a problem. So this is why everybody wants to have these solutions just to get away from that and not worry about encrypting.
Because this is HTTPS though, anyway.
It
right?
is, yeah. There is a validation actually in JavaScript where I'm actually checking to make sure it's an HTTPS. Let's see, there it is. So it basically doesn't even create a form. It's not called via HTTPS.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So bootstrap.js is very likely to cause conflict because there is such a thing called Bootstrap, right?
Oh yeah, it's called, just for this demo I call it
right.
Bootstrap,
Okay.
but
so in production that's not what you call it.
It has a Bootstrap name in it, but it's called something else.
It's unique enough that it
yeah,
won't
it's
cause
unique.
conflict.
It has a namespace.
What do you think of that comment?
Yeah, he said the same comment last night. They called something
My
else.
job is not to prove your husband right. I am very, very sorry. I'm very sorry.
Agreed.
We back the speaker, buddy.
Not from the peanut
Next
gallery.
time, call it my husband is a dumbass. No one will complain.
That's true too.
So Kate, one thing I noticed, and this is not a criticism, but also just a suggestion from somebody who has done extensive work in jQuery a long time ago, but a lot of it is you should consider caching all of your selectors, because I see you'll do $selector, dot something, and then $sign the same selector again. And what you can do is just say var. var this thing equals $sign whatever, and just have that cache, so you don't have to keep hitting the DOM. I saw it
like
with
this one?
CDA validations or CDW validations. I saw that like 3 times in a row, a few lines up.
Yeah, you see you've got the
So that-
object
yeah,
up
just
there,
like this.
cdvalidation.html.
But yeah, that's the
That
same
is-
thing. The
that
request
is
call.
So
all
anytime
weird.
I'm doing this, I could be calling it something cached.
Yeah, see, that's
You're gonna-
querying the DOM every time, whereas you can
Okay.
store the object in a variable and it wouldn't have to.
So you could
I
say
understand.
var CDA validation equals $sign CDA validation, and then just keep using that, and it doesn't have to keep reaching out to the DOM to find it
Thank you,
before
yeah,
you
that's a good
manipulate
point.
It'll be a little faster, but you're not building that much
No.
DOM stuff, so it probably doesn't hurt
I'm
that
trying to
much.
help, man.
But
To Joe's
Well,
point,
because-
it could be in an environment where there are a lot of DOM elements, so
right,
it's possible.
right.
Yeah.
So I also saw that you were building a select object in text. You declared option, and then you added options or select. Yes.
Oh, this one?
Yes.
Well,
That-
this is how I came up with that dropped out.
That works, and it probably always will, but that's not the most elegant way of doing it. There are DOM manipulation ways that you would add another object, add another thing to the list and populate it, which would be a better code way of doing it. If HTML ever changes, that would fail.
So what am I going to use
You're talking about
here?
like create element.
Well,
Yes, you want to
element
create element.
So,
Yeah, so what
like
you can-
options would be some kind of element? Type?
So instead of saying this is my HTML, put this HTML on the page, you create the object that is, whatever your select ID, and within select ID you create a child programmatically and give it the variables. That's the way to do it in code, rather than saying this is all of the text, make that. And the only reason you wouldn't do that, as I say, is if HTML ever changes, that would fail, whereas you would hope that programmatically the JavaScript would always create the object for you as you would intend.
Got it. So use jQuery to create the object.
No,
Something else?
you don't need to use jQuery. Yeah,
But you could. Basically, what he is trying to say, from my perspective, is you've got to basically hook on to a HTML tag, okay, to make that tag into a variable, which is what jQuery does. Okay, so once you have that variable from jQuery, which represents the HTML tag, instead of using the plain text to kind of create that the rest of the tags, you take that variable that has properties and has methods, and those methods are for creating the child tag. So basically, he says use the variable, which is an object that has methods which allow you to create those child tags, such as the jQuery
right,
can do for it.
In case maybe you're saying the same thing, but what he was saying is, so instead of, and I don't know exactly the jQuery way to do it, you can just look it up, but you can say in vanilla JavaScript, you can say document.create element, and you tell it I'm creating a div or
a select in this case.
a select or options, and then you basically just append. So your select is your outer thing. You're appending options to that, and then you're appending them to.
This isn't wrong. This will only break if HTML changes.
No, but I get it. I think that's a good point. That's point taken.
Like something like 80% of the code that goes into browsers is for bad code, or was that just IE?
Yes, right.
Well, I've got a question that is also a suggestion. Why to use the vars when you can use lets and const? I mean, that basically goes.
Well, but this is something that a multitude of people are bringing into their website. So all of a sudden,
she probably has to support IE8.
That becomes very important.
Yeah,
So
that's a great
so
point.
compatible, like the LED, it comes in with which browser?
PS5.
Oh.
It's all
JavaScript.
all the evergreen browsers at this point.
Is it even in IE11?
Well, but here's the next question: if TypeScript, especially, why not develop it in TypeScript?
Wow.
Okay, why not just do it in React?
Thank you, Kate.